Hi everyone, welcome to ChinesePod. My name's Fiona.
And my name's Gwilym. Today we have an elementary lesson and it's all about asking for directions.
Exactly, a very functional, very useful lesson for you today. You're going to be asking, excuse me, how far am I away from A, B, or C? So we're going to be learning that very important sentence structure.
Okay, are there any words we want to learn before looking at the dialogue?
So the first important word we need to learn is 远.
So that's a third tone and that means far.
Right? And then 离, second tone.
Now this doesn't really have a proper translation. I would probably go with
Distance from.
distance from. And it's a kind of grammar structure used when asking how far is it from A to B.
Exactly. So this is the part where it might seem a little counterintuitive at the beginning, but don't worry, at the end of this lesson, you'll be a pro at asking for directions and understanding people's responses. So first, one more time, 离, distance from, and 远, which is?
Far.
That's right. So distance from, how far. That's kind of what we're going to be listening to today.
Okay, well how about we listen to the dialogue and then we'll break it down for you after that.
好，那我们就来听听今天的对话。
离这儿最近的饭馆在哪儿？
在公园旁边，
哪个公园？多远？
不远，走路只要10分钟。
我们骑自行车去吧，走路太热了。
没问题，现在走吧，晚了怕没位子。
好，走吧。离这儿最近的饭馆在哪儿？
在公园旁边，
哪个公园？多远？
不远，走路只要10分钟。
我们骑自行车去吧，走路太热了。
没问题，现在走吧，晚了怕没位子。
好，走吧。
All right, let's start with the translations. 离这儿最近的饭馆在哪儿？
From here, where is the nearest restaurant?
离这儿最近的饭馆在哪儿？
Where is the closest restaurant from here?
在公园旁边。
Next to the park.
在公园旁边。
It's next to the park.
哪个公园？多远？
Which park? How far?
哪个公园？多远？
Which park? How far is it?
不远，走路只要10分钟。
Not far. By walking, it only takes about 10 minutes.
不远，走路只要10分钟。
Not far. If you're walking, only about 10 minutes.
我们骑自行车去吧，走路太热了。
Let's take a bicycle. Walking is just too hot.
我们骑自行车去吧，走路太热了。
Let's ride a bicycle because it's just too hot to walk.
没问题，现在就走吧，晚了怕没位子。
No problem. Let's go now because later on, I'm worried there won't be any seats.
没问题，现在走吧，晚了怕没位子。
No problem. Let's leave now because later on, there might not be any seats.
好，走吧。
Okay, let's go.
好，走吧。
Okay, let's go.
Alright, now that we've done the translations, let's break down this dialogue. And I would say the most important sentence structure is this first sentence here. So let's spend a bit more time on it, and then we can move on to the rest of the sentences, which are slightly easier.
Okay, so the sentence starts with this character, 离
这儿最近的饭馆在哪儿? Now let's first break it. Let's translate it literally one more time. So 离 distance from 这儿 here 最近的
closest.
饭馆
Restaurant
在哪儿?
is where.
So distance from here, closest restaurant is where. Now, this is what I mean by counterintuitive because the word order is very different to English, for example. Now, we've talked about the word order. Let's break down the individual vocabulary within the sentence as the next step. So, 这儿,
Here.
这儿,
Or you can say 这里.
这里, yes, or 这儿. 最近 is the closest.
Okay, so 近 means close. We taught 远 earlier, which means far, so the opposite is close. And 最 just means it makes it the most.
Right? The most close. So now we've learned far. How would we say the farthest or the most far?
最远.
远 or tallest.
最高.
Shortest.
最矮.
So you guys get the point, right? 最 so 最近 the nearest, the most close. 近的饭馆.
Fan is kind of rice or meal, and guan is just a place where you might go to have. It's a
Some
restaurant.
food, yes. 在哪儿 is where, right? Just one more tip, just to remind you guys. Na is that, or there, right? 那里, nar. Now, a quick tip to distinguish it between where is, imagine when you're looking for something, right? You tend to bobbing your head around, right? You're like, where is that? 哪儿, 在哪儿, or 在哪里.
Okay, so by nodding your head, you're mimicking a third
third
tone,
tone.
which means where.
Exactly.
Now, a fourth tone, you're
Pretty sure, right?
Sure, so you're like there.
That, right? Na, sorry, na, or nar. So there's a little quick tip to distinguish between na and na. Now, another way to distinguish it is if you look at the character, it's got a mouth radical.
Okay.
When you ask a question, you have to open your mouth. And most often when we have a question, we're kind of like,
Okay, so if you see the mouth radical, you know it's a question,
You
which
know
means
it's a question.
It's a third tone, it's a na.
where, right? So 离这儿最近的饭馆在哪儿?
So this is a very useful sentence. So rather than going to the restaurant, I want to know where the nearest park is. So how would I say that?
Okay, so we simply remove 饭馆 from the sentence and insert any location you want. In this case, it's 公园. 公园. So you would say 离这儿最近的公园在哪儿?
Now, going back to today's dialogue, we find out that the restaurant is next to the park. So how do we say that?
在公园旁边. Now, 旁边 can mean on the sides, like on the sides, but it could also be on the edge of the park. I mean, it really depends on what the park looks like. But 旁边, now of course you can say it's in front of the park, 在公园前面, 在公园后面, 在公园左边, don't know which one's your left, 左边, 在公园右边. So we'll leave some prepositions for you in the comments, so don't worry about that. So you can kind of put whichever prepositions you want in here.
Now, he replies by saying, which park? So how do we say which? And we use a character that we learnt earlier.
That's right. So we see this question word. Oh, I don't want to say the tone. First, what was the question word we used to use where? What tone is it? Remember when you're looking for something you're unsure? You're bobbing your head around. So it's a third tone. And then what was a character tip? When you have a question, you're like,
So you have a mouth radical.
Radical. So it's nah. Now when followed by a measure word, it becomes which. In this case, 个哪个公园
Which park? And also how far. Now the word for far is 远.
And then 多远, you make it how far. I want to flag a pronunciation issue here. Or not an issue, just a difference. When you hear 哪个, sometimes, or actually often, you'll hear 哪个. Now, why is there this change? Because actually, when you hear 哪个, it's an abbreviated form from 哪一个, which one, right? But the one is kind of dropped. But sometimes in pronunciation, that one is still kept, right? So that's why we go from 哪一个. So you'll hear 哪一个 or 哪个, both in daily conversation.
And this would only be heard with when it's one of something.
Yes.
Because the whole point of measure words is normally there's a number in front of it. But when there's only one, you don't necessarily need to say one because you've already got a measure word stating that it is one of something.
And actually, just to have some extended practice, we hear 多远多远 how far, and we also know the word for close, which is 近 so how would we say how close?
多近
多近多远 that's right. And in this case it's not far, right?
不远
不远走路只要10分钟 This is a great sentence structure.
Okay, so walking only takes 10 minutes. How do you say 10 minutes?
10分钟 and I don't know if you guys noticed when I was doing the translations I did this. So sometimes native speakers when we're saying 10 we go like this 10分钟10分钟 Why? Because the character 10 looks like that. So we go like that, right? 10分钟10分钟
Now, how do we know that they're walking?
Because we hear 走路 which is to walk. So walk only requires 10 minutes or takes 10 minutes. How about if it's not like just, because here we see it's only 10 minutes, right? How about if it's like, it's going to take you 20 minutes
Okay.
or half an hour?
走路要20分钟
Exactly. So here we would drop the 只 right here. Only, it's making it sound close, right? 走路只要10分钟 right? It's only going to take 10 minutes. But if you're saying it takes 20 minutes, you would say 走路要20分钟
Now, a quick tip here. If you're looking, you might see that 要, you know this as to want. But in this case, when we're talking about distance from somewhere,
Yeah.
let's think of it as to take. Because you could say to drive a car takes 10 minutes. How would you say that?
开车要10分钟 or if you want to express how close it is, you can say 开车只要10分钟
So, 只要 is only takes, and 要 means takes.
Or to ride a bike, it takes 10 minutes. 骑自行车只要10分钟
Okay, well, that moves us on to the next line, where because it's so hot, they would rather take a bicycle. Now, the verb to ride a bicycle is
骑 and this is the same for a scooter, a horse, anything you kind of have to straddle your two legs onto, I would say, right? 骑自行车骑马 That was like definitely not a horse sound. 骑马 and 骑机车
Don't make the mistake of saying 开, which is to drive, because that's to drive a car, and it's a common one that even I make quite often.
Yeah, so 骑自行车我们骑自行车去 to go 吧 And do you know why there is this 吧 here?
This is a kind of suggestion. It's almost like a let's ride a bicycle.
Exactly. So here this not only softens the tone, but it makes it into a suggestion. If you just say 我们骑自行车去
That's like
Hard. It's
we
like a-
will definitely do that, whereas they're
We're
just
gonna do this.
presenting an idea.
Right? If you're like, 哎我们去吃饭吧
Okay, how about we go have some rice?
我
A
们
meal.
我们骑自行车去吧
Okay, how about we go?
Let's
By
ride a
bike.
bike. Let's ride a bike. It has that kind of tone, right? 走路太热了
Okay, walking too hot.
Oh, it's just too hot walking. Now, this le here is for emphasis. It's a kind of the same le as 太棒了
Okay,
right? It's
too
awesome,
awesome.
right? 太棒了走路太热了 So here it's just for emphasis.
Okay, so you could drop it, and it just wouldn't be so hot.
You'd be like, oh, 走路太热 It's like, again, so the difference with these little tags you put on at the end of Mandarin sentences, if I just say 走路太热 I'm just making a statement, right? But by making it 走路太热 I'm like, oh my god, you're adding more emphasis. You're making it more conversational Chinese, right? If you're someone that makes just statements, in Mandarin it sounds a bit jarring. So that's why we add these bas, las, as, las at the end of sentences.
Okay, well, they don't have a problem with that. And
没问题,
they
right?
say, how about we go now?
现在走吧
Let's go now. Rather than a direct command of, let's go.
走 right? It's like,
how
走
about we leave?
It's like, oh, 现在走吧
为什么? Why?
Because later on they're afraid that there's going to be no seats at the restaurant. First, let's look at seats in a restaurant.
Okay, so a seat or a position is 位子.
位子
Fourth tone, neutral tone.
位子 Yeah, so this is like a seat. You can do cinema, I guess anything with a
It's
seat.
pretty much the same as English. It's not the word for a chair. It's
Yeah.
just an available
place.
position, a seat.
Yeah, so they're worried that there's going to be no seats. They're afraid that there's going to be no seats. 怕没位子.
Okay, this is not to be afraid of spiders. Just, I'm worried there won't be any seats.
Exactly. So the word 怕 in Mandarin, often when you translate it to English, you're like, really? Are you that scared about something? No, it's just like, oh, I'm a little worried. I'm concerned, right? The word 怕, whilst directly being translated to being afraid, is actually very loose, right? The spectrum in Mandarin is way broader. So it's like, oh, I'm just worried that there won't be any seats.
Now, they're worried there won't be seats later. So how do we say, how's one way of saying later on?
晚了 later on, right? 晚了怕没位子. Now, I don't want you to worry too much about this la. With most la's, it's a change of state, right? But here, just learn it as kind of a set phrase, right? Later on, 晚了怕没位子.
And also, this 晚了 suggests that it's almost too late. Too late, it will be no seats.
Exactly. Now, what do you say if your friend's like, there's going to be no seats later on?
好，走吧。
好，走吧. Okay, we finished today's discussion. Now, before we listen to the dialogue one more time, I just want to do a bit of a quick recap and highlight some of the most important vocabulary and important sentence structures.
Okay.
Now, the first one, as we mentioned at the beginning, is 离这儿最近的在哪儿, right? 离这里最近的在哪里, right? Whichever location you want to plug in there. So this is a great key phrase for you to memorize and learn for when you're asking for directions.
Really useful if you're a tourist and you want to know where the nearest post office is or the swimming pool. You can use this sentence structure and just slot in the location in the end.
And then the next sentence structure I really want to draw your attention to is it takes how long, right, in the context of distance, right? So it takes 10 minutes to walk. 走路要10分钟，开车要20分钟.
And if it's quite close, you can say 只要.
Right, so only takes, right? 走路只要 only takes 10分钟, and you can replace this by whichever, right? 走路开车骑 to ride, remember? 骑自行车.
Okay, well, how about we listen to the dialogue, listen out for those key sentence structures, and we'll see you in a bit.
好，那我们就再听听今天的对话。
离这儿最近的饭馆在哪儿？
在公园旁边，
哪个公园？多远？
不远，走路只要10分钟。
我们骑自行车去吧，走路太热了。
没问题，现在走吧，晚了怕没位子。
好，走吧。离这儿最近的饭馆在哪儿？
在公园旁边。
哪个公园？多远？
不远，走路只要10分钟。
我们骑自行车去吧，走路太热了。
没问题，现在走吧，晚了怕没位子。
好，走吧。
Now, when you're traveling, asking for directions is probably the most common thing you're going to do, but also the scariest thing you're going to do. However, there's a top tip. If you happen to be living somewhere where there are native speakers, even if this is your hometown, just make up that you're lost. Pretend that you're lost and ask where the closest fast food restaurant
on a
is.
Saturday?
I've done it a few times.
Just walk around Taipei main station and just ask for directions.
Pretty much. I know that there's a fast food chain down there, but I ask someone, do you know where it is? And that's a great way to practice. Otherwise, it's very easy just to walk around town, headphones in, and never practice your Chinese.
And I think the thing with asking for directions and question sentences rather, not just question words, in Mandarin initially seem counterintuitive, I think, especially for an English or European speaker, because the way we order questions in a sentence is slightly different. So I think it's very important to kind of familiarize yourself with these sentence structures before you kind of go out into the wild, as it were. And the more of these Chinese sentence word order, so that was a really long sentence, but the more you familiarize yourself with the word order in Mandarin, the easier and the more intuitive it's going to become to you in your learning journey.
Okay, just think like Yoda. From here,
place,
is
how
where.
the restaurant is where.
Okay, well, we'll see you guys next time.
好，那我们就下次见，再见。
再见